Hi, everyone. We are 4 minutes from the beginning of the day, so I'm really excited to open this great day, the Digital Marketing League, the online event, which will take place from a few minutes from now on until 6 p.m. this afternoon. So I'm really excited to open that day. So we will have 8 conferences about SEO and search marketing, and we have the great honor to close the day with John Mueller from Google, the Webmaster Trends Analyst, to whom you will be able to ask all of your questions. So don't be shy, ask your question, and do that the whole day, because you can ask all the questions you want, almost all the questions you want, to the speakers. So we have great speakers specialized in their field, in SEO, content marketing, etc. And you have in the right side of your screen a chat where you can put your questions, and Jochen and I, who are the moderator of this day, will pick up the question and give it to the speaker at the end of the conference. So you can ask all of your questions. Okay, so I am Zora from Textbroker France, and I am here with Jochen. Jochen, maybe you want to introduce yourself by yourself?
Sure, I'm Jochen. I'm also with Textbroker, Chief Revenue Officer based in Germany, and welcome everybody. I also look forward to a great day of presentations in the Digital Marketing League.
Great. So just a small note during the conference. So you have the chat to ask your questions, and stay until the end of the conference, because we have a little surprise for you. We have a game, a little poll, which will enable you to win a prize. So, but I'm not telling you more right now. You will have to wait a few minutes from now, because we are starting in 2 minutes, and I can see that people are registering. We have hundreds of people registering, and it's coming from minutes after minutes. And so hurry up, drink your coffee, because we are ready. So the first conferences that we have this morning are, so at 9:30, Jochen Mebus and Michel Kant, who will speak about smart international content strategy at work. Then at 10:30, Mark Fisher, international market research for your target groups from Merge Media. And at 11:30, Alex Navarro, who will speak about international link building in 2020. So a great program. And just so you know, you will have at the end of each conference, we will end the webinar room and jump into the other webinar room. And to do that, you just have to click on the same link you have used to register here. So, but we will put it in the chat again so that you are not confused, but it's the same link all day. So don't panic, you will find us in each room. And so I am really glad to now introduce Jochen Mebus, who will start speaking about smart international content strategy at work, and also Michel Kant from Rooster, and who has several years of experience in digital marketing. So yeah, so the stage, I think we're on time. I think it's 9:30. Shall we start now or wait a few minutes?
No, let's get started.
Okay, let's get started. The stage is all yours.
Let me see that I can share my screen. Okay, this is great. I can't share my screen. Michel, can you share it, and I'll tell you next slide. I don't know what happened here. Sorry for that.
Maybe there's a time lag because I was sharing mine, so maybe try just one more time.
No, I think I did something wrong here. Never mind. There we go.
Okay, great. See you at the end of the conference then.
Okay. Okay, next slide, please, Michel. Okay, welcome everybody. Smart international content strategies at work. Why do I think I can talk about content strategies? I'm with Textbroker. We're one of the largest content marketplaces worldwide. We've written over 10 million articles since we exist, and over 100,000 a month get added in 36 languages. We have a freelancer community of over 300,000 writers worldwide. So we have some unique insights into what content is all about, what people are requesting, and especially when it comes to SEO, I think we have a good overview of what's going on. Michel, next slide. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. Yes, very excited to be here today. My name is Michel Kant. As has been mentioned a couple of times, I call myself a digital entrepreneur, and I run currently 3 businesses. One of them is Rooster Consulting, where I help organizations get a grip on their online challenges, and I get hired usually for my ability to speak both to business people, so comfortably with leadership, management, but also with APIs. I do program as well. I also run a network of young professionals where I really help them to get a grip on their personal career, mostly focused on the digital marketing world. And I am actually soon releasing my own software where I take all my learnings from SEO and actually the whole framework that I will introduce today into a nice digital way, so that also marketeers who do not know too much of the really in-depth SEO stuff, also so they can use still that data in the back of their strategy. So that's me.
Okay.
Back to you.
Yeah, so this is what we want to go through. I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of content needs. And probably what we haven't said yet is where Michel and I know each other from. Michel has been a Textbroker customer back at his time at Staples, where he was the head of European SEO. So we want to talk a little bit about what Staples did back in those days, because it's a very interesting international SEO and content story. And so we're going to share the presentation amongst ourselves. I'm going to talk a little bit about how content needs have developed, how you can determine content needs based on data, and then Michel is going to talk about his experience in the Staples journey. So next slide, please. Let's start with the evolution of content needs. Next slide. So basically, there's been a big shift in content strategies and content needs since about 2012, 2013. Before those years, Google was only really able to measure the quantity of content. So they would look at how many backlinks does your site have, how many pieces of content has it published, but there was no real measurement of the quality of the content. And that has changed dramatically after Google issued several updates to their algorithm. So Panda and Penguin, for instance, are 2 names that you might know. So today, content has not only got to be for machines, but especially also for the readers, for humans. And you kind of have to hit that middle ground that you can see on the slide to serve basically both needs. So the quantity is no longer the only element. Google is very good at measuring quality of content these days. Next slide, please. And we can see that at Textbroker. This is a comparison of 2 different companies being big clients of Textbroker. One is from 2011 and one is from 2019. And you can see the customer in 2011 ordered 36,000 pieces of content, whereas the one in 2019 only ordered 14,000. Whereas the number of words in each article has almost increased by factor 10, as well as the quality level has increased a lot. You need to know that at Textbroker you can order different quality levels, 2 stars being the lowest one and 4 or 5 stars being the highest ones. So also the quality of these orders in 2019 have been much higher than those in 2011. Also, the customer back then used what we call self-service. So he only used our platform and managed the entire process by himself, which led to just less than 1 person from Textbroker being involved in the entire process. And the customer in 2019 used what we call managed service, where Textbroker manages the entire process for the customer, leading to 8 people from our team being involved in this. And the interesting thing is both of these companies had the same goal, which was to bring small local businesses into Google, put their websites live and bring them high up into Google listings. And the project of the customer in 2011 was very successful, only until Penguin kicked in. So the effect of these Google updates was very clear to this customer, as well as to Textbroker when we compare these 2 clients. So content strategies, yeah, sorry, Michel, next slide. Content strategies of the past clearly aren't working anymore. Next slide, please. And that means content no-goes today are things like thin content. You shouldn't have empty pages or 404s. You shouldn't have duplicate content. You shouldn't have content spinning, whereas there's a little mistake here. It should not say equals NLP, but does not equal NLP, because there are some great technologies out there for automated content generation. And we at Textbroker are also implementing technologies of such companies. So content spinning is not good, but if you do good natural language processing, if you do it with appropriate data, then this can certainly work. No-goes are also purely marketing-oriented affiliate pages that Google can easily detect today. You should not have irrelevant content in there. You should update your content, and obviously keyword stuffing is totally out nowadays. Next slide, please. But there's some good news. Next slide. Content marketing today gets more and more measurable. And that, next slide, please, leads us to the second topic, which is how we can determine content needs based on data. Next slide. So here's an example. This is a screenshot from SEMrush. I'm sure everybody knows that tool. And this slide shows you, for a specific company that I've anonymized here, how many rankings they have on position 1 to 3, 4 to 10, 11 to 20, and so on in Google. So what you can see that in this case, 7,800 keywords rank on position 20 or higher. The good news is there is a ranking already. So Google has recognized that there's content on this website worthwhile ranking. The bad news is it's ranking pretty low, or actually on a pretty high number of pages, and therefore is probably not visible to anybody. So what you can do is determine the content gap to the top ranking sites and then close that gap. Next slide, please. The way to do this is compare your site, which is the one in the left column, with those of your competitors. In this case, positioned on position 4 and 5, and look at different criteria for your content. In this example, which is a real case, by the way, you can see that the site ranking on position 50 has an article on it with 180 words, whereas those that rank on the first page have over 1,000 words in their articles. So other criteria to look at are the internal linking in these articles, is the way the article is structured, is the way structured in terms of HTML tags, in terms of subheaders, also about images, any lists in there. So how does this article look? Because Google tries to find out how relevant an article is for the reader, for the intention of the reader. And this is, these are criteria to look at. Also, when it was last updated. So in this case, you can see that the article on position 50 has not been updated for at least 2 more years than the other ones. So by doing this analysis, you almost automatically get something like a content briefing, something that tells you what you need to do in order to at least be on level par with your competitors that are ranking higher, or maybe even produce a better piece of content than they do. Next slide, please. Another way to look at this is to look at keywords that your competitors are ranking for, but you aren't. And then you can do exactly the same thing and look at what brings competitors, in this case, to position 6, 4, and 3, and 43. And we will find from that analysis, again, what are the needs for the piece of content you want to write in order to start ranking for these keywords as well. And again, the criteria here are more or less the same than those I showed you in the previous slide. Next slide, please. So with that said, this was, if you want, the theory, and Michel is now going to take us through how it practically looked like back at Staples. Michel, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, that is a very good introduction to how we did that actually at Staples. And the one thing that I want to start off with is when you do this right, for me, it really is a bonus that you get good SEO results. If you figure out what it is that your customers, your readers want, and you do that, you implement that content strategy properly on your website, SEO will reward you, Google will reward you with good rankings. That is basically the easy part, because creating content, yeah, you just got to have the subjects and you can start working on it. The difficult part is understanding your audience, especially in B2B, because it's not the same as when you're in B2C, where there's one person buying your product or taking you on for your service. There's a lot more involved from a B2B world than targeting one person. But then from a business perspective, once you've got that done, the hard part is that you have to keep that content strategy moving. And the downside of a good content strategy is that it's going to take some time to build that up and to reap the rewards of the investment that you're making. So what I'm going to speak about in two sections during this conversation is how I did that at Staples. I started there in 2015 as an SEO specialist, SEO manager, and I've built my way there all the way up to head of SEO for Europe, where I managed over 17 countries with 2 websites for each country. And how did we get to 23% SEO growth for non-brand traffic in Italy, for example? How did we do 20% growth in Germany? Those are interesting numbers, and they are really difficult to work towards, especially when you work in an organization where SEO is not understood that well, where everything's about revenue, and actually your target is to drive traffic. Let's get back to that B2B setting. This is, you could call this the customer journey of a B2B sales process. It is at least as complicated as when you're talking to from a B2C point of view. And I would argue it's basically 10 times more complex. And the reason for that is that there are literally 6 to 10 decision-making stakeholders involved in that process, where they go through multiple steps. There's 4 key steps where they go through. Let me quickly mention them. They go through problem identification to explore the solution. Then they might go back from their learnings. They go to what they need for the requirements. They might talk to a couple of colleagues from different departments, and then they eventually go and select their supplier. But then they will also get some new ideas, and maybe they will actually rebuild some requirements or even add new problems that they weren't able to see before. So if you think about that, there are maybe 6 to 10 decision makers. But if there is a head of media, for example, somewhere, and then there is a head of online under him, or an online manager, and then under there's an SEO manager with maybe SEO specialists even, you can imagine the amount of influencers behind these 6 to 10 people. And there you could have a whole conversation about that. And my tip is there to look into the B2B value chain from Bain Consulting. That's a really interesting one. The difficult part from a B2B perspective to do sales is that you basically have no time, or your sales representatives basically have no time to talk to the people. Only 17%, so let's say 1/5 of the time that an organization goes through an RFP, they have time to speak directly with you. However, half of the time of that RFP, the people involved in this process are actually doing research. They're trying to identify their problems. They're trying to learn about their problems. They're trying to figure out what they should do with this. And the good fact here is that everybody is using organic search during this process, because I'm just rounding this up to everybody. So if you don't spend your time on developing a good content marketing strategy, and you don't figure out what the needs are of those people that you're trying to reach, you're going to miss out on influencing that sales process massively. But where do you start, right? How do you get to those insights? Well, the answer is easy. The execution is more difficult. It's market research, obviously. And the way we did that at Staples is we did a lot of keyword research. Like literally, we've analyzed thousands and thousands, like actually hundreds of thousands of keywords. So what you do is, and I will explain this graph, what you do is you grab a section of keywords and you combine them. You say, okay, we define all of these keywords as the segment office furniture. And then when you combine all the data within there, you get a graph like this. On the horizontal axis, you have the number of keywords the website ranks for. on the vertical axis, you have the traffic that the competitors and the websites that say in here rank for. And the further you are on the right, the less volatile you are, because you rank, maybe competitor A ranks for 100 keywords and competitor C ranks for 5 keywords. So you can imagine if one of those or 2 keywords get lost, competitor C will fall down very, very much in traffic, whereas competitor A will probably not even feel it. And in this fake version of the market for office furniture, you can see that we're nicely comfortable in the middle. You know, we could gain some, but there's not like we can make huge steps in here, because we're more or less the second and the third player in this market. And again, this can be based on hundreds or thousands of keywords. So it really gives you a good idea of where you are in this market. It also allows you to create these insights for the segments that matter to your business. And that is really important in this, that you align the SEO strategy, the content strategy, with what is important for the business. Because that's what, you know, if you talk about SEO, very often you talk about the whole width of SEO, and that's just too broad. The organization wants to recognize what you're talking about. And we figured out that segments really help with this. So you group all of these keywords together, and then you get all of these different insights. And this is just a couple of examples that I've shown here, but you get the idea that it can look very different from market to market. And this also then allows you to say, oh, wait a minute, this is fake, right? But if we are supposed to be the market leader in paper, why are we on the left bottom in this market? And I see this with my clients, where some of my clients, they thought, or they literally are the market leader, but in SEO, they basically don't play. And that's a very big realization very often. And that already helps management to get motivated to invest in this part, because also, if they realize that everybody does SEO research when they're looking for their product or their service, and we're not there, you know, they want to be there as well. Like I mentioned, this takes tens of thousands of keywords for us in Staples' point of view, and I'm talking internationally, right? It's not one country that I'm focusing on, but if you do 1,000 keywords for one country, you know, and you have 17 countries and you have 2 websites in each country, it starts to add up. This big data process looks in a very small way like this. So you have a bunch of keywords that in this example define the paper segment, and they're all paper related, but they don't really tell you a story yet that you can act on. It's not usable data other than a bunch of keywords, and we can track our ranking, and exactly we can get an idea of who we're competing with. So that's really interesting. But what does it say about our visitors? Nothing really yet. However, if you group those keywords within this segment and you align that with their need for information, then all of a sudden these keywords are starting to tell a story. And these are the exact same keywords as from the previous slide. And you can already see that the keywords in inspirational, they have a completely different search intent than the keywords in action or discovery or informational. Even though the top 2 are very close to each other, you could argue that the informational ones are for educational purposes and the inspirational ones are for entertainment purposes. The discovery, people generally don't know yet what they need. So you got to also, from a content perspective, provide both opportunities to go into, let's say, the educational, informational side, or go into the product / your service side. And again, this is where that B2B value chain from Bain can really help you to figure out what types of content you want to create. This is what I call the search funnel. It helps you to take the keywords and map them to their customer journey, to their informational need. Or if you take the other approach, you can also go from an informational need, a customer journey, down to keyword level. And this is what that looks like, what I just explained. It's exactly the same, different version. So once we had that, and we had all of this information, we did this on a small scale. We took it initially for 100 keywords, and we realized that we need to start creating content for this. We need to make the HTML ourselves. We had no budgets initially, and there was nothing other for us than to create a proof that we can actually do this on a European scale. Once we've done that, and I will show you the results very soon, we all of a sudden had small-scale results. We had clear pain points because we could show in which markets we were not performing as we should as an organization. And we had a scalable process. The only thing that was difficult for us was to figure out how to properly do content, because with all these websites that we had and all of these categories that we had, these segments that we had to work in, we realized once we've done this manually that creating copy was a very difficult process. And this is where Textbroker came in. Textbroker helped us to define what a good content briefing should look like, and they showed us how we can actually also scale that that last challenge that we had that we couldn't figure out how to scale, how to actually do that. And this is where Jochen will actually speak a little bit more to.
Exactly. Thank you, Michel. So yeah, as Michel said, content briefings were a topic. I wouldn't say a challenge, but a topic. And let me tell you a little bit about content briefings. If I had 10 seconds left, next slide, please. If I had 10 seconds left, that is what I would tell you. A content briefing needs to have everything you have in your mind about the piece of content you would like to see. So that's the most simple rule for briefings. Obviously, we can talk about this for hours, and we have with Michel back in those days. So let me give you a little bit more information. But the rule of thumb is put in your briefing everything you have in your mind about what you want your content to be. So next slide, please. This is a stats from Textbroker again. Why our authors don't write pieces of content that they find on our platform. So why do Textbroker authors not get written? And the good news is that there are not that many that don't get written. So, but the largest reason for content not being written is that the briefing is ambiguous or incomprehensible, that there are keyword mistakes, that sometimes clients change their mind halfway through the process, incomplete briefing. So you see, briefing is here the biggest issue that our authors see. So if you put yourself in the shoe of a writer, if he gets something like, write me something, he will not write that piece of content because it's almost certain that what he or she writes is not going to meet the expectation of the customer. So next slide, please. Here are good content briefing ingredients, basically. On the left-hand side, that's the data piece. The data piece I've talked about before. You should always do that analysis, as Michel has done it with Staples. But then the right-hand side are more the subjective elements that briefings need to contain of. And those are, what goals do you try to follow with your content? What's your target group of people you want to address? Because it makes a big difference if you, in the tone of voice, if you address a young audience or an older people's audience. Destination means where does that content get published, so that the writer can also look at what's the style of the content, of the other content on that website. Talk about topics you want to get covered in your content. Talk about style and tone that you want, writing rules. Also give positive as well as negative examples of pieces of content that you like or that you don't like at all. So these are just a few hints into what good content briefings consist of. If you want to know more, next slide, please. Then please drop me an email and we'll send you a copy of Textbroker's Content Briefing Guide, which gives you a list of things that should be considered for content briefings. But again, only fill in those that you know about. Tell us what you want, what you really, really want. That's the whole thing about it. And this briefing guide is purely a guidance into the things you should think about. So next slide, please. With all that said, back over to Michel, because that's what we did with him back in his Staples days. And he's going to share some of the results of what that led to with us now.
Yeah, so we're back at that part in time where we were ready to scale this business, this project. For now, it was a group of people, myself, and one person from my agency that I worked with. And it was time to convince management, because we had all the ingredients to make this a success. We had a scalable process. We had markets, segments where we didn't perform as we believe we should. We figured out what the weaknesses are from the competitors. So we actually did the analysis that Jochen was speaking about at the beginning of the presentation, where we could actually physically see why we are not in the top 10 compared to the competition, why they were stronger than us, what their content minimum requirements were, link minimum requirements. And we had some small scale results. So how do you convince management in this case? And here are actually two screenshots of that, what that looked like, those small scale results. So after we initiated the project, we actually started seeing that we could grow our market share. And here as well for another country. I couldn't find which one this was, but I'm pretty sure it was Germany at that time. So we took this information and we showed this to management, and this is not something they like to see, and especially if it's a category that they care about. So you could also use this in your stakeholder management internally. You just go to the merchandisers in our case that are responsible for for these categories, and they're like, yeah, but we don't want to see that. They want to be on top of the competition, especially if they know competitor B and C and they see that they're doing better than we are doing. That always just does magic. And sometimes there's some competitors in here that they've never even considered to be their competitor. And that also helps to drive the case, because let's say competitor D is a very local, small niche player. They're like, yeah, but we are the international company. We should be ahead of them. How is it possible that they are doing better than us? Well, they have better control over their technical stuff, their content, etc. But here's the plan on how we can grow and outgrow them. So you put all of that together, and behind those nice fancy bubble graphs, you actually have data, right? So you, for example, and I'll walk you through what you're seeing here, because this is how I create business cases also for my clients currently. You grab a segment, you figure out the keywords that belong in that segment, you figure out the monthly search volume that those keywords together have. And a note here, having keywords from 4 levels of that search funnel allows you to have keywords that are very high in the customer journey. So questions basically that usually tend to have a low search volume, and also discovery keywords that tend to have, like the word paper, that tends to have a high search volume. So defining a segment allows you actually to focus on all of those different search volume driven keywords. It kind of puts that conversation away, finally, that you can focus on keywords that have a little bit lower search volume too. I know that, it's generally known that if you rank number 1, you get about 30% of the clicks for that search volume. So 30% of the monthly search volume is 7,800. And I know from my research and all of the times that I've looked at all of these segments that in general, rule of thumb here is market leaders tend to get 30% of those max available clicks. So that's really how you can drill this down. You can then average that out with, or you can then cost that out with your average CPC, and you know what it would cost you to buy yourself into that market leader role if you want to get that amount of traffic. If you add your e-commerce statistics on there, again, this has nothing to do with Staples, but this is how the process works. You can figure out where you're currently ranking, like what is your current traffic doing, and what is your current estimated value of that owning that piece of the market versus what it would be like if you would be market leader. And that gap, that is what you should request as investment budget, or that's what you can work with. You have to figure out yourself if how realistic it is that you're actually going to get that amount of money. But these are actual numbers that you can work with, that you can lay over the 3 items that I mentioned before, where you have the results, where you have the process, and you have the need. Now you also have the financial need, and that is what management really wants to see, especially if you have to go above management and also convince leadership. So we had that done. We got them invested. We started huge projects. We were able to even overhaul the complete hierarchy in our informational hierarchy of the website. And of all the countries that were involved in this project, and that led to some to the successes that I'll speak about in a little bit. However, there is one small challenge when you're doing this. Let's say you need to invest in content marketing, which is very often the case, especially if you want to also tackle those top of the funnel keywords. There is no patience in business. And just to show this to you, what this means is, let's say you have a hypothetical startup on, you have 100 visitors and you grow 20% month over month. After 12 months of really hard work and focus on your content marketing strategy, you'll only have 750 visitors a month. And business people will look at this and say, wait a minute, that's all you got after 12 months of all of this investment, and you took 10K, 20K that you've invested in this. After 24 months, you're going to be at 6,500 visitors. That's some decent growth, but good luck to you to get there, even, because it takes such a long breath. And then after these 24 months, that's when you really are going to see your growth, if you're capable of maintaining that 20% average growth rate, right? Which is a little bit on the high side. But in here lies the answer to how to keep management motivated. And I don't know if you've ever heard about Ahrefs. It's this small little SEO tool that we all use, at least that we use a lot. They show, you can see the graph going. It goes from left bottom to right top, left bottom to right top. It takes 5 years to grow from 50,000 visitors a month to 900,000 visitors a month, right? And I would say the trick is not to focus on that 900,000, because if you tell management that you're going to have 900,000 visitors in 4 years from now per month, they're going to laugh at you. The average lifetime of a CMO at a company is 3 years, I believe, according to some of the Gartner research and other statistics. So that's not that high. They are not going to care that much for that time. What you need to do is focus on monthly average growth rate. That is something that they can understand, because you can tell them, okay, I'm going to ask you to invest $1,000 now for 10 years against a 20% growth rate, guaranteed. Never guarantee anything in SEO, but hypothetically, you can say that. They will put that $1,000 down. If you're going to tell them, I am going to grow your $1,000 in the next 10 years to $100,000 guaranteed, it's a little bit more difficult to sell. So that's where this monthly average growth rate really comes in. It allows you to focus on this number that you can achieve this month, next month. You can look back at it. You can look like 2 months ahead. It's still close enough. And everybody understands, if you keep growing 5% month over month, that in the long time, that's going to pay off massively, especially if it's management leadership that also knows how the stock market works. And then there's the market share. This allows you to do and show off your moment in times, like how much of the market do we own? And these were literally the two KPIs that I focus on mostly from an SEO and a content perspective, because I want to show that I own the market and that I'm capable of driving structural growth from a visitor perspective. And if you then look at how Ahrefs did that, for them, for over 5 years, this is, you could between brackets say, only 5.5% monthly average growth rate. If you can do 2%, 3%, that's already going to add up over time. So also to give you an idea on what kind of numbers to aim for. Like, don't aim for 20%, aim a little bit lower, because it does get more difficult over time, of course. Here's how we reported on, for example, market share at Staples. On the left side, you see a fragment of a quarterly report. At that time, we used Bright Edge for this, and we defined our market, our segment, office supplies, with 3,500 keywords. And at that time, this was, I remember the first time I presented this insight, that we actually outperform Amazon, that blew everybody away, because everybody was thinking that Amazon was way better than us. In general, they are. But when you zoom in into what is important to your organization, they were not, and we were outperforming them. So that's really interesting to show off with. And because it's on so many keywords, it is completely statistically significant. You know, you could actually say something about this. And yes, those keywords are subjective. So if Amazon would do the same research, they would probably have 3,300 keywords and they would not 100% overlap, right? So you can't compare their data with our data. It is your vision of the market. And on the right side, you see how we tracked it more for management and for ourselves, and for, let's say, my manager at that time. And we could have a look at the weekly performance. We can see in the yellow line there that we have structurally about 285 keywords for this segment, Office Basics. And then you could see that at that time, we had a nice bump in growth within the weeks that you see here. Tip, I found this video 2 weeks ago, and it is it actually takes their content marketing strategy, and he shows off with how that impacted their revenue. I would highly recommend to look that up, because it really shows off from a different angle how this can impact also your bottom line. And then back to the results. So at Staples, we did this project. It took us about 2.5 years to go through. We literally created 5,000 pages of content, or Textbroker created them for us. We mapped almost 500,000 keywords. Can you imagine that? And that when I looked at the numbers when I left last year, that really blew our mind. We didn't really realize that. It adds up when you do multiple countries, of course, and especially if it's multiple websites. Our key countries grew in the double digits. This was something that we were really proud of. And what really shows off is that if you take this approach and you look at it from a data point of view, you define the market the way it's important for you, you're actually able to drive consistent growth over multiple countries. So data really helps you to take control over your SEO and your content strategy. And that's it. So if you want to talk more about that, I'm always happy to answer your questions right now. And if there is one that pops up later, add me on LinkedIn, find me on a chat. Love to speak more. Thank you.
Thanks, Michel. Zora, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Michel, for this great conference. So we have a few questions actually in the chat. So first, a question for you, Michel. How do you know when you have enough keywords to define a segment? Is there a minimum or maximum number of keywords?
That's a good question. The maximum, I would say no. There is no maximum. That actually, the more the better. But keep it. You don't have to focus on every single keyword within there. That's the luxury of having a segment, that you can decide yourself which keywords you're going to focus on within that segment to grow the segment as an SEO manager. So you don't have to have that conversation anymore about keywords with the organization, with your stakeholders, because you can just show off with growth and market share, and nobody really should care about how you get that growth, right? Other than don't do black hat. The minimum amount of keywords, you actually need a data-backed strategy like this to be at least statistically significant. And for that, I would say definitely don't go lower than 20 keywords for a segment when you're going to talk to the business. Preferably, you go a little bit higher than that, but for sure, no lower than 20 keywords.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I think you answered very well to the question. We have another one. How did you come up with keywords for your clusters to compare against your competitors? And which tool did you then use to come up with statistics?
Also a good question. Well, at that time, I definitely used Bright Edge as a solution. We had an enterprise toolkit there, but you can just as easily use an Ahrefs, a SEMrush, or use the tool that I'm developing to do this in the future. I'm just going to throw it in there, because that's the difficult part, right? Getting all of this data, and it's a bit of a manual process. It's a little bit annoying process. So you go into Ahrefs and you just find those keywords. You put in your own URLs within that segment that you have. Like, let's say for us, we could put in all of our paper pages, figure out what they're ranking for. Grab all the keywords, filter the ones out that are not relevant, and then put them back in Ahrefs again, or in SEMrush or in BrightEdge, whatever tool you're using, and then get another list of keywords that are close to that. Again, you go through the process manually. In this case, that's how we did it, at least at that time, where you have to then put the categories and the subcategories next to them. If you go through that process a couple of times, you will end up with a very nicely refined set of keywords. Then you can actually, by putting those keywords in Ahrefs, you can actually find who are ranking for that. The answer would be too deep to go into the whole to explain every single step that goes in there. But you have to more or less identify who are ranking there based on all of those keywords. And you can do that with tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush. Then you have to do a lot of Excel work. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there was a question about the tool you are using for keyword analysis. So I guess you mentioned it several times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another interesting one. If you are from Tom, if you are actually limited to budget and need to filter out keywords, would you focus on high research volume keyword or rather take the low search volume keywords? This is a good question.
Who's going to answer it?
I think it's for you, Michel.
Okay, both actually. No, I would definitely remember the data that Jochen spoke about. That's what shows weaknesses in the market. You have to figure out where are you do a SWOT analysis. Yeah, I would love to have another conversation for a whole hour on the whole framework that I used to do this. But like, first of all, you have to map that competition. Once you have mapped that competition based on your segment, you can do the analysis that shows you the data that Jochen spoke about in the beginning of this presentation. If you do that within one segment, you can figure out on a keyword level or even within the search funnel on that level where the weaknesses are in the market. You want to show growth as soon as possible to management, especially if you're still in that pre-scale phase. Doesn't matter if it's small volume keywords, then you just have to add a little bit more to them. But you want to show that you can generate growth by doing this. And you can do that if you figure out where the weaknesses are in the market. And the data that Jochen showed is the data that we used for that.
I would add to that, I think it's less a question of high or low volume. It's more a question of keyword relevancy for you. And also whether it's an informational or a transactional keyword. So you might have a long tail keyword with low volume that gets you almost 100% conversion. Then I would certainly focus on those keywords. Whereas higher keywords have higher competition, but might be informational and don't get you a high conversion at all.
Yes, that's absolutely important to consider as well. Are you trying to show that you can drive revenue, or are you trying to show that you can drive market share / traffic?
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a few minutes left. Maybe we can take one other question. Maybe more for you, Jochen. How did you manage international content creation? Or maybe also Michel, how did you manage international content creation? Is it better to translate or to create fresh content in each language?
I think that can also be another session to talk about that. I think we at Textbroker see both practices happen. My recommendation would be, if you have something like a product description, then probably a translation is okay. If you have a high quality landing page or a blog article, I would always recommend write it fresh in the target language, because then in the translation you will always lose a little bit. I'm sure all of you have been on websites in your own language where you thought, who the heck has written that? And it was a translation which has never really been proofread. And that is a killer for every website, maybe not from Google's perspective, but certainly from a reader perspective, who will not stay on that site. So generally, my recommendation is go for content writing in each target language, unless it's a mass piece of content where there's not much really language-wise to add, such as a product description, for example.
Okay, great.
I can add to that for one sentence. You can imagine also with pens, how much can pens differ between countries. You could argue that you can translate that part. However, I also believe that, I really believe SEO is a bonus. If you create content, if you create pages that answer the questions that your people, your audience have, and you do that only with good content, right? And that means copy that is personalized to the culture, and cultures differ between Belgium and the Netherlands, Germany, Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Poland, everything. There's so many nuances that almost always I would go for unique copy versus translation. Even in our cases with pens, where you could argue, what can you write differently about pens? It doesn't work with me in how I look at SEO. And SEO needs to be that reward of doing something good for your visitors. And that means adapting to the culture.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for these explanations. I think we're coming to an end. We don't want to be late for the other session, and we have a game to implement right now. So I would like to thank you again, both of you, Michel and Jochen, and also all of the partners who are participating to this day. So here are their names, and now it's time to implement the game. So that's the little surprise for you guys and for all the participants. So you can vote with 3 questions. So the first prize you can win by participating is an Amazon voucher and a content consulting and Textbroker voucher of 150 euros. Second prize is a 50 euro Amazon voucher and 150 euros Textbroker voucher. And then the third prize is 150 euros Textbroker voucher. So to participate, you just have to scan this QR code with your telephone. So you just grab your phone, you picture the QR code, or if that doesn't work for you, you just go to Slido. There is the website, the link, sli.do, and the letters. So you just do that, and then you can normally answer to the first question for a few seconds. Okay, I can see that people are voting. Great. Think about all you will be able to buy with the Amazon voucher and the Textbroker voucher. A few more seconds.
Just for me to add, for 150 euros, you get a very decent piece of content at Textbroker, or several.
Okay, so we're closing the first question. We're going to the second question. What was your main takeaway? That's the second question, which is in the app. What was your main takeaway during this conference? This will give us also a very good feedback. And we will take it to improve our next webinar day, maybe. Few more seconds. People are voting. Great.
I'm very curious.
I'm sure you will have just perfect feedback.
I hope so. Well, this should be something that I can learn from. Always something new to learn, right?
Wow.
You share this at the end, like
Yeah.
later?
Yeah.
Well, not here, but we have to.
No,
we have to, yeah.
Of course.
You get everything, Michel.
Thank you.
Right. And by the way, someone asked in the chat if you could have your email address, Jochen, to get the briefing stuff.
Yeah, I think that has already been put into the chat.
Okay, great. So next question, next and last, enter your email to join the prize draw, because we need to have your email to give you the prize. So
and when you join more than this presentation and enter your email address again, you double your chances.
Good.
And I just see a question if we have a replay. Yes, there will be a replay, which we will send out.
Yeah. With the slides of the conference, of course. So a few seconds more. Okay, we're done. So thank you for participating to the game and good luck to all of you. I think it's time. Yeah, we have a few minutes left until the next conference. So we are meeting at 10:30 for the next one. So to remind you, the next one is Mark Fisher, Meet the Needs International Market Research for your target groups. So we are putting for you into the chat the link to connect to this room. So it's the same. So don't worry, you will find us. I'm just staying here in case someone is lost, but we'll meet there in the next room at 10:30. Okay?
Good. Thank you for having me, and speak to you next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. See
Bye.
you in a few minutes. You can leave the room and go to the other one. I'm just waiting in case someone is lost. Bye-bye. See you in 5 minutes in the other room. Just click on the link in the chat and we'll see you there. Bye.